BitSwap is the hottest new way to trade tokens. Crawling all the top decentralized exchanges, BitSwap will get you the very best price and value for your trades. BitSwap is changing the game. Try it now at bitswapdex.com.
Welcome to Rice TVX and the latest transmission of Stranger Than Fiction. On today's show, I am joined by Robert O'Deck, who is the host of the Observation Deck channel. I'm going to have links down below and above for his first appearance, and as always, I encourage you to check that one out. Today's conversation continues with all things legal fiction. Before we get into it, make sure you visit ricetvx.com and sign up for my mailing list so you never miss an update or new Rice TVX content. Plus, you can find my social media links, contact information, get Rice TVX merch coming soon via the shop, and more. If this is your first time ever watching any of my videos, check out and explore my channels. Make sure you subscribe to Rice TVX and Rice TVX2. Both can be found on YouTube. And hit the notification bell to get alerted to new videos. Also, you can follow me on Odyssey and Library, where I have my full catalog of videos plus extra content. And you can also find Rice TVX on BitChute. If you want to support Rice TVX and what I do directly, I have my PayPal, Cash App, plus my cryptocurrency addresses via my Cointree link below in the video description. You can also join my Patreon channel, where you will get early access to some of my videos, exclusive content, and more, with 4 different levels of membership, all offering something different. If you are looking to purchase and invest in precious metals, gold and silver are both good safe haven assets to hedge against the financial collapse we are experiencing. Check out Money Metals Exchange. I partnered up with them and you can get a free half ounce of silver. Visit moneymetals.com, be a first time buyer, purchase a minimum of $100, and use the promo code RICE. You get a free half ounce of silver, and it's another way to support the channel. I will include links down below for everything I just mentioned, as well as everything I talk about on today's show. All right, ladies and gentlemen, joining me on today's show is Robert. He is the host of Observation Deck, and he's also the creator of Gaia University, or GaiaUni.com, which is an alternative education course that you guys can check out. Links will be down below. And this particular video is actually going to be a collaboration between both of our channels. He's been on my channel before, and he took some clips from that video and produced something for his channel. And I'll have those linked down below in my video description. But depending on which channel you're watching this on, it's a collaboration between both of our channels. So make sure you subscribe to not only Observation Deck, but also Rice TVX. So, Robert, I appreciate you accepting my invitation to come back on. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's a pleasure to be on Rice TV again, Chris. I think we end up gelling on the same wavelengths and stuff, and we're of the same mind and interest in the same thing. So, pleasure to be here.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And I appreciate your time. And for people, to give you a little backstory, we've been having a conversation for about an hour and a half before we decided to start recording. We've had a great conversation. I was telling Robert that I would like to have conversations more frequently, at least once a month. And, I'll try my best to stay on top of you in regards to that. It was late April that we did our last video together, and that was the first time we talked. It was kind of us getting to know each other.
Yeah. I didn't realize it was so long.
Yeah, well, I was telling you too. I kind of had to take like a mental break from a lot of the legal fiction stuff. So it was like,
I know exactly how you feel, mate. I really do.
Yeah, it can have its wear on your soul and your mind and your body at the same time. So
yeah. You got to look after. If you don't look after your mental capacity, nobody else will for you. And the drain, I'm sure you get the same, but the drain on not just the time, but on your mental capacity, because you're getting so many messages and emails. And as much as I personally would like to help as many people as possible, it's physically impossible. There's not enough hours in the day, and I don't have those energy levels.
Right. And well, I mean, the difference too between me and you is you got other commitments that you do outside of the channel, where this is kind of all that I do full time, you know. Um, but still, I mean, we're both in the same position. We've both been crazy busy, but it's good to be able to catch back up. And as we were talking beforehand, I really want to focus today, and because I like having conversations in regards to the legal fiction stuff with you, because you do research, you're trying some of these things out yourself, you interview a lot of individuals, some of which I've had on my channel as well. So I wanted to kind of get your thoughts and opinions based off of your research, your knowledge, your actions, and your interviews and such, what you think are problems that you see going on with people's situations, and their course of action and what they're doing for remedies, what you think works. There's a lot of people that talk about common law, SPC, the special party, the UCC, trust and equity, private versus public, status correction. And then one of the things that when I decided that I was good after my burnout, and getting back into what I wanted to do with the legal fiction stuff, is focus on solutions. So that would be kind of one of the last things I'd like to talk about. But what are you seeing as problems?
I think from the perspective of, I mean, obviously the problems that we're all facing in the world for unlawful claims, it coming from every direction, because, you know, as you mentioned, Chris, about the legal fiction, but more, notwithstanding those problems for a moment, but the problems that we may be creating for ourselves is one of overstanding and due diligence, and that is to check for yourself what's either being said or what's being touted as a solution for something. Because as far as I'm concerned, one of the first things that I will do in terms of my own research into any particular area of remedy, of solution, is there a precedence for this particular method in the Supreme Court or appellate courts? Because if I can't find a reference where I can reference something, whether it be in a notice or an affidavit, then I'm not going to make that claim. Because as you and I were talking, as you say, just before I came on, the general rule of thumb for me personally, and I'm only speaking on my own behalf, this is not advice for anybody, but for me personally, I know for a fact that your very first thing is, so why are you bringing a claim? What is your cause of action? That's what's, you know, why are you doing this?
Right.
What tort, using a common law term, what tort has been put against you in order for you to make this claim? And if you keep that very succinct, that's fine. Now, once that tort is done, you need to back up that cause of action with evidence. Now, that evidence could come in the form of witness statements. It could come in the form of a recorded video, which cannot be questioned, and all this kind of stuff, which we see all the time on the internet. More so now, because obviously with multiple screens available to us in the public, those screens come with cameras. So, you know, even now people are walking around. I mean, I, for the very first time, have bought myself an action camera. And, you know, that's on my chest or whatever. Or it's actually on my my helmet now when I'm out on my bike, doing my own thing.
Your new e-bike that we were talking about.
Oh, yeah, guys, please go and say hi to my new channel on e-bikes. I've got myself a Super 73 ZX, and it's a fantastic toy. I was actually going to call the channel Old Fart Young at Heart, but I thought it's really bad keywords. so I forgot that one. But
dude, I wanted to say that's cool that you did that, because it gives you a chance to do something that you love and enjoy and distract you from a lot of this stuff that you're dealing with.
And I think it does. I mean, don't worry, I'll jump back onto the cause of action bit again. But I think it's also important that when you're in the midst of dealing with claims and remedy and all the rest of it, especially on the level that I am, because of the publications that are out, the Telegram groups that I run, obviously the YouTube channel and what have you. It is draining, and for me that e-bike thing was simply I need that downtime. That's how I recharge my psychological batteries, my physiological batteries. You know, I'm lucky enough to live in a beautiful part of the country, and I can just jump on my Super 73 and go off and do my own thing. I'm not near emails, Telegram, and the only reason that phone is with me is for, well, it's normally for a GPS if I'm out of area, but 9 times out of 10, I know this, and maybe it's because of my age, Chris, but I am happy leaving my mobile phone on the shelf in the front room, and I probably won't even charge that up for a day or two. I'm not interested. It just sits there and acts as a clock rather than anything else.
I definitely cannot say the same.
Yeah, because I'm of the generation where I actually lived a life before mobile phones, and believe it or not, before the internet. You know,
Yeah, I did too, but I'm a little bit younger than you, so I have a little bit more time with the internet and with cell phones, and as far as in my lifespan.
Well, I mean, from a personal, I'm not going to go into details, but I was being the age I am, it was an advantage. When the internet came in, I was actually part of probably the very first group of people who were very good at circumnavigating passwords.
Okay.
Let's just put it that way.
OD the hacker.
Well, in my misspent youth, we used to do what we call blue boxing and all that kind of stuff long before any of the stuff that came out. We could phone freak and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, sorry for that. Yeah, all of you people out there that wants remedy and are fighting claims, or you're making claims or something, remember that it's vitally important that you get that downtime. You really need to charge that battery. But moving back on to the cause of action, and then you're obviously going to evidence this cause of action. Now, on top of that, to make your claim or your defense rock solid, if you can locate Supreme Court, appellate court, or judicial reviews that totally connect to what you've just said in terms of cause of action, then what you're actually doing is you're being very clever in compelling the judge very, very little wiggle room other than to find in your favor. And the ultimate and the ultimate remedy would be the remedy that you find in law. So, for instance, one that comes up very often in my world is in the UK laws is fraud, the Fraud Act 2006, Section 3. And that specifically tells us that if someone that you're asking for information and evidence from refuses to give you it, then it's fraud by omission. So you can cite that. I mean, that's just one example.
Right.
But so the general format as you work down any of your claims and notices, and I'll explain why I'm going through this, is that you've got your cause of action, you've got your evidence. This is what happened. This is cause of action. You've got your evidence, whatever that might be. It could be a letter of demand that was sent to you. You know, that's evidence that they're asking this person for money. And another little tip I'll give a lot of you on the money side of things is if you see the numbers or a dollar sign or a pound sign and the numbers in contract law, that's not a sum certain. They have to be written in words.
So it had to be written out phonetically, not.
Well, put it this way. In the old days, when you wrote a check out, what did you have to do?
You would actually do both. You would actually write out like 2000 and put TWOTHOUSAND, and then you would put like a 00 and a little slash all the way to the very end, and then you would put 2000 and you would sign that thing.
Right.
You think so why are you a line? But that line's actually a contract.
Right. So what you've just done, that's a promissory note that you've just created. Okay. All checks are promissory notes.
That makes sense.
Because if you look at the 4 criteria to create a promissory note under the Bills of Exchange 1888, that check meets all 4 criteria: a date, who it's paid to, who's paying it, etc., etc. That's a promissory note by any other name. All right. But when you write the words on the check, it makes it what we call a sum certain. If it doesn't have the words, and if you look at legal documents and they know what they're doing, you'll see it spelled out as well, because it's a sum certain. Well, if it's not a sum certain, then what are these numbers? Because, I mean, I don't know if you realize that the dollar sign itself does not represent the dollar. Okay, the dollar sign, the S, is for silver. That's where it came from.
Okay. Now, I mean, I study economics and didn't know that. That's something I had to look into. That's pretty cool.
So, in other words, someone's saying to you, you owe us this amount of money in silver. Well, and think about it. I mean, I haven't done this personally, but it did make me smile because I could see the logic in it. If someone makes a claim against you, you can always write back to them on a conditional acceptance and just start the sentence with, I promise to pay you at a future date this sum. Right? So you haven't said I'm not paying. I mean, well, let's say alleged sum. All right, because obviously they've got to evidence that they've got a valid claim. But if you've put a promise to pay, you've kind of done a quasi promissory note, and they can't start any court action against you because you've not only given them a quasi promissory note, but you've also pointed out that this isn't uncertain. So what are you asking for? What is it you're asking? I don't understand. Explain this to me, because this holds no legal water whatsoever. You know, but the thing is, sorry, I'm digressing again.
No, that's fine. I'm enjoying it.
Jumps all over the place. But the point being is that if you have this format in your head, and I say, I'm not suggesting that you do, it's just how I do things. Cause of action, evidence. If I can get a Supreme Appellate Court or a judicial review, or even the law. Now, if you're lucky enough, you might get all of those. But then if you put all of that in, the point being is then you move on to your next part of your claim, which again, you repeat the first format, which is cause of action 2, evidence, etc., etc. So you end up with a bulletproof statement that compels the judge or whoever's reading this no maneuver whatsoever, because and people they need to understand that the reason I always say appellate court or Supreme Court is because they are the higher courts. You can't have a case law in a lower court if you're taking to a case in a higher court, because higher courts can overturn obviously lower courts.
Right.
But lower courts can't overturn higher courts.
Right. There's an hierarchy.
And higher courts won't overturn themselves either. So you always make sure whenever possible that it's the most recent law case you can find. So especially if it's 2000 plus, if it's millennial plus, you're pretty good to go. If it's an unusual law, like for instance, I've done a few on promissory notes in terms of the bills of exchange. I think I said bills of exchange 1888, but it was 1882. Sorry, folks. So don't need to put the comments below saying, Rob, you got that date wrong. But the point being is that you will find case law all over the place. And the knack, after you've read a few, they might not make sense to you in the first instance. They didn't to me. It was all gobbledygook. It was just, what did this? I don't even know what the judge meant by that last paragraph. Nowadays, because I've read so many, it does come to you. I just want to make it clear here, Chris, for all our viewers, I'm not some freaking IQ genius or anything like that. I'm an average intelligent guy who has a penchant for just studying stuff. And if I don't understand it, I won't move forward in what I'm reading until I've searched for what the hell that means. And then I can put it back into the context of that paragraph or sentence. Now I can comprehend what that is saying, and now I can move on. And I know it takes a little bit of work, but this is what I'm trying to explain to your viewers in terms of do your own due diligence. Because I think, and the original question you asked, Chris, getting back to that, was what problems do you see? Well, from a remedy point of view, It's all of what I've just said, but the biggest problem that I see, which is pertaining to due diligence, is that stop asking for templates.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that is something I've been saying a lot. A lot of people are looking for this fill in the blank system and just show your papers and like, hey, this is, my papers, and not actually even comprehend what those papers say. Like, you're going to have to be able to represent what those papers say without the papers, know all of it. The papers are there just as like a way to identify that what the hell you're talking about. Because if you don't, and you go in there just taking what Robert did and just putting your name in place of Robert's, thinking that that's going to solve all your problems, it's not.
And this is, to me, that's the weakest part of anybody's claim or case they're either bringing or defending. And unless you fully comprehend the content of what it is that you're going to send off, then you are going to get caught out, because inevitably, and I call it the remedy for the remedy, because the problem is, I mean, I've had people say to me, Rob, can you teach me how to deal with promissory notes, write promissory notes and all the rest of it? I said, listen, I could tell you how to do a promissory note in 5 minutes flat. That's not the issue. The issue is, what are you going to do when the promissory note is dishonored by the bank?
Right. So what I would say, because when we're talking about being sovereign, which is what people want to in this space, that people who are learning about the legal fiction, people want to achieve sovereignty. So when you achieve those levels, you would have to be fully accountable for your actions, self-governing.
And there's the key point, Chris, is that not only are you fully responsible for your action and self-governing, but you've got to comprehend and understand what that means in any walk of your life.
Right, because we've grown up in a limited liability situation where we don't have to be fully responsible for what we do.
Exactly. And the state is happy to create this nanny state. I mean, they use such wonderful colloquial term, the nanny state. We all got nannies that we love. This isn't the nanny state. This is the Satan state. Because the nanny is an evil bitch, and she will shaft you at every opportunity and call it a benefit. So it's not what it's meant to be on the surface, like all things in life, and what governments are doing, let alone let's not get into the past 24 months, but it should be pretty damn obvious to most people what is occurring in the world and how evil and when you're talking about the population of Earth in its totality, how evil a very small percentages, and yet the power that they've managed to pull into their own circle in order to control the rest. And it's not because people, I don't think it's obviously it's about fear and consequences and all the rest of it. But I've said this before, that apart from the 4 basic laws, which you can find as the basis of all laws in common law, I won't do any harm to anybody. I will honor my contracts. I won't steal. Okay, that's basically all you need, but if you take that, all of a sudden you've got these thousands and thousands of acts, statutes, and legislations, which should tell you instantly that there's something gravely wrong with the system. Because we have the saying here, and I don't think people understand what exactly it means, which is by the consent of the governed.
That's how everything takes place. Go ahead.
Exactly. And the point being is, yes, you can stand there and go, I do not consent, and all the rest of it. It doesn't hold water. You actually got a stronger defense in saying, I don't wish to contract with you, because that's what's going on at the moment. Everything, in one of my old episodes, everything is contract. Almost every conversation that you have with a government official is them trying to create joinder with you. And that includes, as so many of my previous episodes have pointed out, that includes when you go into the administrative courts of any description, or the star chambers as they once were called. The point being is that when we talk about the consent of the governed, what the government, it's not what we're talking about, it's what the government perceives as the consent of the governed is, well, hang on a second, you voted the politicians in and we made this law. That's the consent of the governed. But when the law impinges on the freedoms, liberties, and rights of, and remember, you've got the people and then you've got the individual. Well, in a society, in the societies that we've created, the individual doesn't exist in the eyes of the governed. It's a collective. It's like a freaking Borg cube or whatever, you know. And so you need to understand that, like consensual contracts, obviously there's, you know, what we call unilateral contracts are for the most part unlawful. And I'll get onto the council tax side of it in a little while for my UK viewers. But the point being is that these ideas of contracting or creating joinder with people is I don't contract. And unless you've created an offense, as you probably know, I don't answer questions, because the moment you start, if you answering the question, you're not in charge of that conversation.
I want to apologize because I've heard a lot of people say, as king, so you have to be asking the questions to be as the king.
Exactly, which is why, like when I write out my any notices, or whatever it might be, if I make a statement on a cause of action and I want to convert that notice or the notices that I've sent previously into an affidavit, I write them in such a way that it makes it easy for me to cut, copy, paste what I've done in the notice and then follow it up with a question to be rebutted. And here's a little tip for people from a linguistic point of view. When you're creating an affidavit, number one, don't ask people to explain something in your affidavit, because they never will. All right. Don't ask people to agree with the above statement, because they never will. Okay. Because you've given them an out. The only way that you should be framing your questions is to start the question, because you know that they're not going to answer. So if you know they're not going to answer your affidavit, it remains unrebutted. Well, you might as well get some juicy ones in there. But the structure of the sentence itself should, in my opinion, start with, do you deny XYZ? Because that way, if they remain silent, they haven't denied it. So does that make sense? Your audio's disappeared, by the way.
Yeah, I try to make sure I'm muting sometimes so stuff does come through.
Right. So if I said to you, Chris, do you agree with that above statement? Well, you can rebut that by going, no.
Right. But if I don't say anything, then it's assumed that I agree.
Right. So if
that's what you call a tacit agreement.
Yeah. So in other words, so if I say, do you agree with above statement, that puts me in a weak position, because you can answer no and you've rebutted it. But if I turn around and say, do you deny the above to be true and a fact? Well, if you remain silent on that, because it is true and it is a fact and I've evidenced it, so you can't answer it. If you don't answer that, then that's an agreement. If you think about it, all your paperwork, all your documents are what I call paper soldiers. All right. They are.
You mentioned that last time. The last time we talked.
So basically, anything that you're sending on pre-action protocols is in fact a court hearing on paper. You are sending one in, the opposition is firing back, you are firing back, the opposition is firing back. And by the end of it, you're sending the final affidavit, which is effectively your speech before the jury. And if that remains unrebutted, like the judge or the prosecutor saying, do you deny that you shot that person? I'm going to remain silent. Well, what do you think the jury is going to think by that? Because you didn't say no.
Right.
And this is in I mean, obviously we're not talking about murder here, but in principle, it's exactly the same. What do you think the judiciary are going to say when they see that you have not rebutted that?
It's not going to look good.
Exactly. So you're always trying, when you're creating this, I suggest people think way ahead and imagine that whatever you're writing, a judge will read later. So not only have you got to set out your cause of action, your evidence and the laws and what have you, but you're going to make the opposition look as bad as possible. I mean, I did a rebuttal for somebody the other week on a strikeout claim. So they'd sent their claim into the court. The barristers or the solicitors got hold of it as a third party interloper. They sent a complete strikeout claim to the court. The court sent them on to my friend, and they obviously sent them to me. Whenever possible and in the appropriate place, when I was writing, we call it an N244 here. When I was writing the N24 in rebutting the strikeout claim, at every opportunity, I actually left the sentence with, I'm sure the judge won't appreciate you trying to mislead the court. And I was seeding that all the way through, because I not only want to rebut them, but I want to make them look as dodgy, as unlawful as heck for what they're trying to do. I mean, one of the things that they'd said was, we dismiss the idea that we haven't communicated with Mr. Smith, we'll call him Mr. Smith. We have replied to every single request of Mr. Smith. And I spent the next paragraph explaining to the judge the difference between a reply and a response. And I said, I can reply to you. Like, if you ask me a question, I can reply saying, I'm not going to answer that. That's a reply. But the point I'm trying...
Yeah, because I mean, I've always thought those two words meant about the same thing.
Well, you see, but if I respond to you, I'm taking into consideration what you've said. In other words, if I ask a debt agent, I want you to show me these documents, and they write back and go, you can't have them. Well, they've replied, but they still haven't produced the evidence.
Right. So they haven't responded.
So I completely broke this reply bullshit down and then put, clearly this solicitor is deliberately trying to mislead the court, because we are now 223 days. I always quote days. I don't do weeks or months because I like the bigger number. We are now 223 days into asking for evidence of this claim, and no evidence has been given. Whilst I've got a reply to every one of my demands, I've had no response in substance. I do wish this solicitor would stop trying to mislead the court. And, it's like bang, bang, bang. Because it is a sword fight. It is, it's a battlefield. It really is on paper, which is why I've said before, it's paper soldiers. But all of this stuff comes with your own due diligence. And as getting back to that original mistake thing, the mistake is that if you're going to go back to these templates and everything else like this, how are you going to learn? It's a little bit like sitting next to somebody in a classroom and saying, can you give me your answers so I can copy them down? Well, do you still know how to do that equation? No, I just give you the answer, which is why the teacher says, show me you're working out. Because if you can't show me your comprehension of how you got there, then you didn't get there.
Right.
And it's no different when it comes to remedy, and I had to learn it as much as anybody else. And as I said, I'm of average intelligence. The only difference is I am fastidious in my research.
You are a lot smarter than you're giving yourself credit for, but that's cool. You can be humble, and it's all right. There's nothing wrong with that. And, I really appreciate you bringing up the whole template idea and the fact that people need to do their own research, do their own due diligence, fact check what people are talking about, and make sure it can be backed up. And another thing that me and you had mentioned before we started recording was one of my biggest gripes, and it's not something we had to really talk much about. I just wanted to highlight that there are a lot of teachers or gurus, as people want to call them, that are not actually practicing what they preach. Where what I mean is they're not learning about any of these things in regards to courts and interactions with law enforcement themselves. They are getting, a lot of these individuals are getting students who have problems and are seeking help. And these teachers are kind of vicariously learning through their students, unfortunately. And so I just want to highlight that people pay attention, that they're
I
not.
call it the Patsy Syndrome. And that's exactly, I mean, I'm not going to name names or anything like that. I wouldn't be so cruel, but there are a percentage of people out there in not just in the world of remedy, but in any area of life. But obviously we're talking about remedy, that will act or live vicariously through, like, oh, I've had an idea for a remedy, but I'm not going to try it myself. So I'll put it out there and we'll see how other people get on with it, come fail or success. And for me, I think that is in some way morally incorrect.
It is unless you're being transparent about what you're doing.
Yeah.
If you're saying, hey, look, I haven't done any of this stuff myself.
Yeah.
But this is what I'm thinking, and I'm putting it out there, and I'd like to get some feedback on this. That would be different than just saying, I know that this works and follow this method and pay me X amount of money monthly, yearly, or whatever the situation might be.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what area of remedy you're in, but in essence, I've always tried, hand on heart, to be honest in what I'm doing. And as far as I'm concerned, whether it be laws of liberty, the lean machine, diffusing the debt bomb or everything, I've said all the way along, I'm just simply sharing my journey, and I'm actually taking that journey. You know, and from what I've learned on that journey, I am sharing with you in not just on my YouTube channel, but within those ebooks, because I do have a passion for, I just happen to have a passion for writing, so I can combine my passion for writing. You know, I've even got, you know, a couple of novels that is because I've got a passion for writing. And I know most of my books that are actually keeping the lights on are about remedy. But I tell you what, I've got one novel that makes the Da Vinci Code look stupid.
All the novels, can they be found on
No, they are, Chris, they've been sitting on my, there is one up on Guy Uni, which I don't shout about much, but it's called the Atlantean Protocols. It's in there somewhere. I can't remember.
These are all your books right here, right?
These are all my, well, most of those are mine. There is actually, no, they're all mine. Yeah.
Okay, so here's the Atlantean Protocols.
Thinking, Spellcasting Another World, Smoking, that's mine. Yeah, the Atlantean Protocols. That is my one and only audio book. It runs, I think it's an hour and a half or something, but it was actually based on the governance system, the system of democracy that I perceived was in Atlantis because of the shape of the Atlantis. So if you look at the system of governance on that wheel,
yeah,
it gives the people total power, and it doesn't allow the governing people to make relationships with external forces long enough for them to manipulate the system.
I like it.
And if they try to, then the inner circle there representing everybody else removes them from office. And it's exactly the same shape as Atlantis. There is credit in that book, and there's also a quiz in there, because there's a lot of information in that book that if the listener figured out some of the principles that are in that book, if they figured out where the actual principles came from, they'd be very surprised of the original. I mean, I expanded immensely on the original concept, but the original concept, not of the Atlantean connection, but of governance, came from Gaddafi.
Muammar Gaddafi, or whatever his name was.
Yeah, he
was it Iraq?
Yeah, no, sorry, it was
Iran.
No, it wasn't. It
wasn't Gaddafi.
Libya.
Okay.
Libya.
Okay.
And so the core. So I expanded on what Gaddafi had done as a thesis when he was at university, because I found I read it, and I found it's like, this guy has I mean, in spite of all the mass media bullshit that's gone on and this, that, and the other, and I'm not going to get into whether he's a good guy or whether he's a bad guy.
Right, but never tried to implement a system like this in Libya.
Well, I mean, they had free education. They had free hospitals. When you got married, you got your own house. The state paid for.
Oh, interesting.
There was no mortgages.
Very
so
interesting.
when you say, Chris, he didn't try to implement this system, I think you need to dig a little bit deeper.
Okay.
Because
I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, because the perception that we've got of Gaddafi is the Western press media point of view.
Yeah, the narrative that's been pushed out to people. You're exactly correct, man. And you know that's one of the reasons why I'm glad that we get to have conversations. And then the other thing too that I wanted to highlight, another reason that I enjoy having conversations with you in regards to the legal fiction stuff, law versus legal, is because, like you're saying, you're actually trying to put some of this into action yourself. You're not. I'm trying to get to the point where I'm educating myself to where I can start doing that. And that's where I'm, hopefully going to be very soon. But that's what I appreciate about you. You're not just somebody who's speculating. You're actually learning from a lot of what you're going from doing.
Yeah, I dive nowadays. I dive in feet first. Now it's like I've cut my own teeth. I've been baptized in fire myself. I have made hundreds of mistakes along the way, but then I expect to do that. In my younger days, and I just want to say to your viewers and everybody else, listen, people, making mistakes is part of the learning curve. It really is. So don't beat yourself up because, oh my God, I got that wrong. Well, that's great from the point of view of you're not going to make that mistake again, are you? So you've got now, however steep the learning curve is, we all have to have that learning curve. And there are still things that I'm picking up on a daily basis that I think, oh, wow, that's a great little golden nugget, as it were. And it's the same with the debt side of it. Now, obviously, diffusing the debt bomb. But when I ran the masterclass on diffusing the debt bomb, which is now, I'm going to do a shameless plug here, but it's now in digital format. So go on the site and
that's on GaiaUni.com.
If you go onto masterclass, you'll see the whole diffusing the debt bomb masterclass that I created for students on a live feed.
Do I have to be logged in to hit the link?
No, you should be able to just hit masterclass and it should just come up.
There it goes. I guess my internet's being a little slow.
I must have a word with my webmaster. She needs to trim that a little bit.
No, that's all good. I don't think it's my internet, but there we go.
Yeah. So basically,
I like the martial arts.
Yeah, exactly. Because I call my students debt ninjas because they kick ass.
Love it.
But apart from the book itself, all of the golden nuggets and the extra information I found on the journey that created the original Diffusing the Debt Bomb book was now put into as almost like an update in that 55-page manual, which is not a repeat of the book content. It's all brand new material, what I call golden nuggets. And what I learned to do, and it's not just diffusing the debt bomb here, but what I learned to do in terms of remedy was, if I was floating around the internet looking for this, that, and the other, and like we all do, the internet is designed to distract you. So once you understand that concept, use it to your advantage. Because what I tend to do is I have two screens at home here. So if I'm on the net on one of the screens, I'll have a Word document open on the other one just in case. Because what I tend to do is if I find a link or a golden nugget, as I call it, I will then grab that and stick it into my what I call my master file document pertaining to that subject matter.
Okay.
And then I can do a deeper dive when I'm not being distracted by stuff, and I can focus on that, which is where the updated manual came from, because all of a sudden I'm finding this stuff as I'm doing my own journey on dealing with debts, thinking, damn, I could have used that in this, or, oh, I've just found out that, well, that's what the master file is for, is like throw all of that in there, so you can refer back to it later, and then you end up making your notices better, better, and better, and more succinct, and inevitably shorter.
Right.
You know, I used to start off notices. God, mine was 10 pages. Now they're down to 2. You know,
Well,
because
they say practice makes perfect.
Well, exactly. So, and again, these are just my methodologies of doing stuff. You know, other people might have their own ways of doing things, but at the end of the day, you know, the mistakes, I think, is overall, if I could sort of generalize that mistake, would be people have been so brainwashed by the system that the system has been designed for us to ask permission, you know, we play this mental subservient role, and what we should be doing is taking responsibility for ourselves, because this moves us into the early stages of sovereignty. And without your due diligence, I'm sorry, folks, but you can't have sovereignty. And filling out a piece of paper telling the world that you're a sovereign isn't going to do squat.
I like the way you brought that back around.
I was trying to give you a segue, mate, into...
No, you're good, man. So do you want to give us a little update and explain what this council tax handbook that you're putting together is?
Right. So at the moment, I mean, I know people here in the UK, I'll be brief because obviously we've both got very large audiences in the US anyway. So it's exclusively for the UK.
Yeah, but there's still people in the UK, but...
Yeah. But in the UK, we pay what we call council tax. It's a throwback from the old Margaret Thatcher days of poll tax, and I've been researching for at least the last 4 or 5 months, and I know people are giving me stick for saying, "When's it coming out? When's it coming out?" But like I said, guys, there are so many distractions and other things going on that I have to jump on it, and I swear, hand on heart, today I spent 6 hours on it again. And it was the 4th time that I went through one notice that I've put in there that will give you all the ammunition that you could ever need. And some of it you've never seen before. I can promise you that. And none of the ammunition I've put in there has been repealed. It is all current laws. It's still in force, and you can use them. I've gone right back to the 14th century and all the way up to modern day, including Supreme Court cases. If you were to ask me, when's it going to be finished? I'm aiming for the end of the week after next. 2 weeks, guys, 2 weeks max. And I know I said it would be ready by the end of last month, and we're 7 days into this one. But unfortunately, I've been dealing with cases, petitions, and all sorts of other stuff at the same time. So council tax is a big bane of many, many people's lives here in the UK. And I'm hoping that this, well, I'm not hoping, I am convinced from what I've seen on the internet, Chris, that this is the most definitive guide on council tax that's ever been written in the alternative scene.
Sweet.
And at the moment, it's 70 pages. It will probably come out at about 100 pages of detailed information. Do not act upon the contents of this book until you've read every single page.
And then fact checked it. Do your own due diligence.
And yeah, absolutely. Fact check everything I'm saying in that book for yourself.
Okay, so let me ask you this. We're recording this right now. For me, it's Wednesday the 6th. By your time now, it's Thursday the 7th.
Yeah.
I think that we mutually are going to release this on Friday on both of our channels. So are you saying 2 weeks from Friday?
2 weeks from Friday to give me some breathing space. Yeah.
Okay. So it gives you like 16 days.
Gives me 16 days. And I was, as I say, I was working on, believe me, guys, I've written this particular notice out 4 times. Right. Because,
and I can tell you're meticulous, man. You do your research. You're really making sure that you're, I like to say, dotting your I's and crossing your T's.
Yeah. And I think if you're going to put something out in the public domain, you have that responsibility. And I do not, as we were saying earlier, I don't do anything through vicarious students or anything like that. I loathe the word guru, because for me, from a spiritual point of view as well, it's like, hey, I'm a guy, and if people are happy to share my journey, that's great. But you are your own guru. You are your own master. You are your own sovereign. And it's that
so start acting like it.
Yeah, exactly. Take responsibility for yourself. Fact check everything I say, and then you can move forward for yourselves, because you know, we could move on to like status correction and all the rest of it, but guys, I'm telling you now, status correction is here and here. That's where it is. And you action your status correction. I mean, don't get me wrong, in the literal sense of the word, on paper there are certain things you can do on status correction, but for the most part, the sovereignty of who you are, and if you saw my previous upload on the 3 venues 1 court, you'll realize that there are levels of overstanding that you need to have under your belt in order to figure out, well, how do I act as a sovereign? Well, if you have to ask how you act as a sovereign, you're not quite there yet.
Then it's time to go back to school, young Padawan, little grasshopper.
Exactly. You know, so it is about, I mean, the 3 court levels that Chris has put up there is basically the 3 levels of you becoming sovereign, and what you've got to deal with in terms of what's coming at you, and how you stand your ground with confidence and I wouldn't say arrogance, because that's, you know, it's usually the ego that causes most of the problem. It's about being comfortable in yourself.
Well, if I'm understanding or overstanding this correctly, once you start going through all this research, you're going to want to come correct and in honor. You're not going to want to, the ego is going to be taken out in the process of the journey to get to where you need to be.
Yeah. Because
should.
Well, yeah, I mean, this, when people talk about inflated ego, we normally associate it with someone who is arrogant. But in actual fact, the government, since the day we were born, has done nothing but pump up our egos, because our egos is used for another purpose as well, which is a defense mechanism. And we are always on the defensive. So ergo, our ego, our id, is constantly there, which is why we were talking earlier about, you need to stop being at that level, that vibration, and get out into the green and to the pastures and away from all this stuff, in order for that ego to go back down where it's supposed to be and have your spirit and your soul come out. Now, this isn't cheesy stuff. This is how your body and mind heals itself against all of the onslaught that's coming our way. And when it comes to the sovereignty side of it, sovereignty and status correction are 2 different things. Okay. Sovereignty is who you were born. And I've said this before.
Because you're born with certain unalienable or unalienable rights.
Yes. So, and this is the thing. It's not a case of, I want to be sovereign. You're already sovereign. Your job is to uncover it. You already it. Yeah, exactly. We were all born with the capacity and the resources that we spend a lifetime looking for. They're already here. Okay. Your job, I say all you've got to do, because actually it's a difficult job for some, but our jobs is to uncover what already exists. Nobody can give you confidence. Nobody can give you anything. It's something that you uncover. I mean, I used to be a hypnotherapist in London for many, many years, and I taught at King's College University on forensic hypnosis. And I used to say to my students in class, when I got a client here one day, and they said, what's the problem? And they said, really nervous in public. I'm socially inept. I don't know. But bottom line is, I don't have any confidence. And I kind of used a cognitive behavioral approach. And I turned and I said, right, well, that's an interesting statement to make. So you don't have any confidence? No. So if you don't have something, how do you know what to ask for? What do you mean? Well, you're telling me you don't have any confidence. So is there any point in your life where you felt confident in doing something? Go back to your childhood. It doesn't matter. I mean, when you rode your bike for the first time, make you feel good? Yeah. Would you describe that as confidence? Yeah. So what you're actually asking me for is, you're not asking me to give you confidence because nobody can give you anything. You're asking me that you've lost it somewhere and you need me to help you find it. Because you still own it, you've just buried it. So, and it proves that you've buried it because you wouldn't know what to ask for if you didn't already own it. Because you've just described to me what confidence feels like. Do you see what I mean?
No, I totally see what you mean. And I'm sitting here, thinking about you saying, I'm just an average guy. I'm not that smart. And I'm listening to what you're saying. And a lot of what you say is very mind blowing. So,
well, the point is, though, if you break down how we beat ourselves up internally, because we are our own worst enemies.
100%.
We're
our own problem and solution at the same time.
Exactly. And the sad part, Chris, is that a lot of people get to see is problem. And what I demand, and I used to, when I was coaching managers for corporations, and I'd say to them, so what's your goal? And they go, oh, it's XYZ. I said, right, okay. I said, the biggest mistake most people make when they've got a goal in life? And he said, what's that? I said, they think they can do it in one giant leap for mankind. I said, so the question then becomes is, let's go in reverse. Let's forget about how you're going to get there. And the manager used to sit there and go, well, then how am I going to take the journey? I said, we're going to take it in reverse. I said, let's assume for a moment that you're already there. Okay. Now you and I are going to back engineer where you are.
Okay.
So would you rather try and build it or back engineer it?
No, it makes more sense to back engineer it.
Right. So in other words, any goal in life, and you could say sovereignty, you could say remedy. It doesn't matter what it is for you, the individual, but it's a series of steps that you can back engineer. So my question was repeated many, many times. It's like, well, in order for that to happen, what needs to happen first? And then what happens? And then what happens? And then what happens? And now that happens.
Right.
Now, the reason most people fail at their goals is because for some reason we're wired and we're very impatient because of, I'll tell you, because of the media and the internet. We are, give me the information quickly now, which is why you and I, as YouTube creators, know full well that if our episodes go over 1 hour, people click away because they want it now. Now it's a very I want instant satisfaction. I want it quick. I want it easy. I want it, short. Give me bite to, and that's the problem with goal setting, is that, there's my goal and I want it yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you need to do your due diligence and you need to back engineer how you're going to get where you want to go. Now, you can spend the rest of your life saying, you know what, I failed at that goal. Yeah, you failed at the goal because you tried to leap it in one step and you missed out the 10 in the middle.
Right.
So the very first thing that any of us need to do when we're aiming for a goal or we're doing due diligence is, and step one is always the same one, Chris. Step one is change your damn attitude. Period. Okay. Throw away this instant gratification thing that you've been programmed to on YouTube, Facebook, and all the other social media platforms. Try and move away from that instant dopamine hit that you're craving.
Right.
Why do you think the like button is on your messages on Facebook? What, just to see how many people like it? No, to bring you back for a dopamine hit going, oh, wow, look, I got 100 likes on that. Yeah. Boom, dopamine hit goes up. It's more addictive than heroin. Okay, I did a whole program on this, and believe it or not, on the dopamine side of it, strangely enough, YouTube took it down.
It was taken down. Did you get a strike for it?
I got a strike for it because it was misinformation. I'm like, what? This is scientific and it's psychology and it's my area of expertise, and And that's because I leveled YouTube as well, because it was like, and this is how it works. The psychology of YouTube, the psychology of Facebook, and all of these other social media apps. There's nothing social about the media that you're using, I can assure you.
Right. No, it's all about engagement. And like you said, just keeping you the dopamine effect to the point that it keeps you interested. That's why you were saying you could go on a ride with your bike and leave your phone at home. Where I could do it, but I would still be like reaching for my pocket, thinking I still have my phone on me by habit.
And that's where the programming that needs to be broken comes in.
Right.
It's because you see, the phone doesn't control me. I control the phone. And I choose whether or not to power that phone. I mean, I can tell you now, my phone is sitting on the bookcase in the lounge. It's not even powered on. It hasn't been powered on for 4 days because I just can't be asked with it. And the only time I will pick that phone up and take it with me, and it will still be powered off, I will take it with me, is if I'm going somewhere and I think my wife might want to get hold of me. Apart from that, I have no use for the damn thing. And the only reason I bought that phone in the first place is because being a passionate photographer, I bought the phone because it had a good lens on it, not for anything else. And I bought a case from the States, which allows me to click in some really nice Zeiss lenses on the back of that phone.
Well, I will say, like, some of the cameras on these smartphones are way better than a normal camera that you can get.
Well, I've got a professional setup. I mean, I've got the Canon 5D Mark III with L series lens. I mean, there's about £7,000 worth of camera gear that I haven't taken out of the bag since the phone lenses got as good as they are.
It's crazy.
It's absolutely mental. I was looking at it the other day thinking, my God, it's sitting there. And I used to, but I'm carrying all that gear around where I can actually put that lens in my top pocket now. And it's like, it's just crazy. 4K video and all this kind of stuff. So
it's wild.
The thing is that this remedy or this sovereignty, this due diligence, it all comes down to the very first changes that we have to make is to try and deprogram ourselves from that kind of influence and then find ourselves again. I mean, I know this is all sounding a bit cheesy and spiritual, but it really is. Find yourself, because I think the saddest part for a lot of people is they're lost. And I'm not talking about physically speaking. They're lost within themselves. They don't know who they really are. And to me, that is sovereignty. Locate who you are once more, who you were born to be, and then you were kidnapped by the system psychologically.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Now when it comes to so there's the sovereign, the status correction side of it. That's a different thing. Although we use the word sovereign within the idea of status correction, the reason I'm differentiating it is because one is head and heart, and the other is more like statute.
Right.
Right. Because status correction is proven to an external system of your status, whether that be sovereign or whatever it might be. So that's basically, status is basically putting your sovereignty down on paper
for the system to recognize, and then you
for the system to recognize it. But before you do that status correction, you've got to have gone through what it is to be sovereign.
Right, which is a journey that you're saying that you got to go on by doing your own due diligence, doing your research, actually applying these methods and learning from mistakes and going forward continually, no matter what's happening. And just progressing by learning from the good and the bad, the positive and negative, and just keep moving forward.
Exactly. And, even when I don't know, police approach you. I mean, I've had the police approach me one night, and I was getting some money at the cash point, and he parked right behind my car about 11 o'clock at night, not too long ago. And I was just about to get the money out, and I turned, and he's parked right there with the blue lights flashing. And without me getting the money, because I hadn't put the pin in yet, I pulled the card out of the wall, put it back in my wallet, put it in my back pocket, walked up to the police car behind my car, and it was that far from my bumper, and tapped on the window, which kind of surprised the two coppers sitting in the car, because they're like, "Whoa, what?" Wound the window down. I said, "Excuse me, mate." I said, "Number one, you're too close to my car. If anybody hits you, you'll hit my car. Number two, you're illegally parked because you're within 15 meters of a blind corner. It's a bit irresponsible. And number three, why have you got your blue lights on?" I said, "Are you stopping me for something? Because I'm already stopped."
Right.
And he says, "Who are you?" I said, "That's not the question. I asked you 3 questions." And cut a long story short, I mean, I'm not going to go into details, but they backed off and drove away. Because and again, this, I think it's not arrogance, it's not anything like that. It's sovereignty. It's like, no, I'm comfortable in my own skin. I will not be intimidated by the fact that you've put those lights on and you're in the wrong on 3 separate accounts.
Yeah, I mean, 100% of what you're saying, it makes 100% sense. And so you mentioned status correction as being because I was asking as part of what we were going to talk about, what you, based off of like your research and your actions, what you think works. So obviously status correction is something that people can look into. Are you finding, and we don't have to spend a lot of time going into details about all these different things, especially if we're going to do like future episodes together, but in regards to the UCC that people bring up, SPC, when people talk about common law, trust and equity, going into the private, what have you found of all those things, even that I didn't mention in those elements, that work, that you, from your understanding, understanding?
Without doubt, I mean, again, this is just me personally, but without a doubt, the first on that list for protection, for want of a better phrase, would be to take a very close look at establishing a private trust. All right, and protect your assets no matter what. And I think it was J.D. Rockefeller that says, you know, control everything, own nothing. And it would be the trust. It would be the trust path that I would take.
So what about because you're mentioning this trust for, from what I'm understanding now, is just for assets and ownership of property. Like, would you expand that out? I've heard people taking and doing a status correction, doing business as a DBA and a few other things, and putting all that inside of a trust as well. Yeah.
I mean, once you've established the trust, you can set anything else that you like within the trust up. And I mean, obviously the settlor or grantor, depending on which side of the pond you're on, it's the same thing. The person who sets up the trust, you know, you can act as the beneficiary, obviously, and whoever else you name as the beneficiary within that trust. Now, if you've got your status correction, when people bring up the subject of status correction, one of the questions that keeps coming up in my mind is, and I'm not being funny when I say this, is like, okay, you want status correction, what are you going to do with it? Why? Do you know what it means?
Right. Now, for me, being in the United States, and being a U.S. citizen, I'm from my understanding and what I'm doing with my research, that is what puts me under their jurisdictional control.
If you're filling out,
for me to correct my status would be for me to get out of their jurisdictional control.
And this is where I find that dichotomy sits, because the point is, Chris, that if you're filling in the system's forms, UCC, you're in the system.
Right, you're using a system
because you're using the system. Now, you can, don't get me wrong, you can use the UCC ones, 308s, and all the rest of it. I've read loads and loads on it. I haven't gone anywhere near it for the simple reason is, from a UK perspective, I couldn't find any case law that relied on UCC here in the United Kingdom.
Okay.
That had actually got anywhere in terms of whether that be status, tax, or everything. And that 1099 and getting
have you considered looking into like the other British territories though, like Canada, Australia, and see if there's anything in relation to it?
Well, yeah, I mean,
correspond.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I think there is a connection.
Okay.
Without a doubt. I mean, I have read, and I can't verify this, but I have read that a few people have done their 1099s, which they would, in order to do a 1099, you would have had to have done your UCC anyway. Okay, you can't do a 1099 without your UCC 1 and 308. So you've already got to establish your status from that point of view in order to do a 1099, which for those viewers who don't know what a 1099 is specifically, and correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, because now we're dealing with stuff on the other side of the pond.
It's an IRS tax form, basically.
Yeah. So you can claim back your transactions, not just tax, but your transactions. So if what I don't think people are aware that, like, for instance, if you're in the supermarket and you've used your card to buy goods and services, whatever it might be, or you've gone to the petrol station and what have you, the 1099, if you do it correctly, that gets you all of that back every time you use your bank account. And what the banks do is they hold on to these receipts. I think it's 3 years or something. All right. And if you haven't claimed that back, the banks do it on your behalf and keep the money. That's why a 1099 exists.
Right. And this all kind of relates back to the STKV, the CQV.
It all relates back to the fiat money system, the way we're screwed over by promissory notes and all this kind of stuff, and modern money mechanics, which we can talk about in a lot more detail at a later date. But yeah, it's all part of the same system. Everything from a mortgage agreement and a promissory note right through to every single transaction. Because remember, every transaction, it's two elements in it behind the scenes. One is it's a contract. And the second is it's a trust that instantly collapses on completion of the transaction.
Right, because it's people being equitable on both ends.
Exactly.
And equitable exchange, is that the right term?
Yeah, equitable consideration. So
okay.
So every time you do a transaction, you are creating a micro trust, if for want of a better phrase, until that trust is collapsed by you settling
instantaneously. So like if you go to a store and you buy something, you created a trust, but as soon as you pay for it and you receive the item, the action of the trust has been enacted, so the trust is now been absolved.
You see, this is why most people think it's about supermarkets keeping an eye on what's been sold. Now, obviously, for stocking purposes and for profit and loss, there are two receipts at every till. One given to you and the other remains within the system itself, obviously, so they can balance the float and of the till and what have you. But there's a more important secondary reason why that's in that system, is because that's the bookkeeping accounting for their 1099s. And yes, the 1099s, as far as I am aware, apply to the UK system. So that would lead me to believe that so does UCC.
What about the special party creditor stuff? Do you know anything?
Well, yeah, the secured party creditor.
Secured party creditor, sorry.
Yeah. Again, what my hesitancy on that side of it, living in the UK, was I didn't like the idea of now being registered with the IRS. You know, because I'm trying everything in my power to be away from the system itself. Is
there not like a UK equivalent to the IRS?
Well, yeah, I know. But if you're doing if you're doing the route that you're saying through UCC, you even as a UK citizen, you're registered with the IRS. You're not registered with HMS Treasury.
Okay.
So in order to get your transactions, you would have to be UCC IRS registered on the 1099, but you would still be in the tax system of the United Kingdom in the normal sense of the word.
Okay, so, that makes sense.
So you've actually, I mean, for me, from a sort of moral point of view, I'm sitting here thinking, but I want to get out of the system. I don't want to go deeper into another one. Right. Because now I'm responsible for both, you know, and the IRS I'm now registered with puts me further into the system. And I mean, if you've ever met anyone who's tried to fill in a 1099 correctly over the last 3 years and got it right first time, then they must be a genius.
What I'm curious about, though, is can somebody who's not a U.S. citizen get involved with the IRS because the
Yeah,
IRS.
for the simple reason, and correct me, viewers, if you know different to this, but from my understanding, it's purely my understanding, because it's not an area. I mean, it's an area I've glanced over,
right,
and then moved on to something else but I am interested, but because I don't have enough knowledge in that area. But from what I understand, and the answer to your question is yes, Chris, because again, this is what I call, what we said before, this is chattel speak, right? Because the international banking system, the IMF and the central banking system, the IRS and everybody else, there are no borders. And yet, because we're told, okay, you're an American citizen, I'm a UK citizen, and never the twain shall meet. Yeah, that's chattel. We're on the plantation.
Well, okay. They're trying to separate out, like, I'm on a different plantation than you.
Exactly. But in the financial system, that's their plantation is global. Yeah. So all of this stuff, like the UK, if you look, I mean, if you track back the UK banking system, it goes to the central banks. The central banks go to Wall Street, City of London, and all the rest of it. So it doesn't come as any surprise that a UK citizen on that plantation would have to apply to the IRS for a 1099 after they've established their status via UCC. Because the banking system that is being used is international.
Right. That makes sense. It does.
So while we on the surface thinking, oh, they're two separate entities. Well, come on. Modern money mechanics and the financial global system it's not a separate entity. It's a totalitarian financial lockstep system.
Legalized crime.
Exactly. And the IMF are probably the biggest con merchants in the world, because they're designed to economically cripple the victim, so the IMF and their cohorts can then take over the resources of the country and tax the crap out of them over the next 10-20 years.
That's another reason I like talking to you too, is because you're very knowledgeable in economics. So I mean, I could definitely see us do like a separate conversation about economics, and then maybe dive into a little bit of the cryptos and digital world, even history. I was telling you before we started recording, I'd like to maybe dive into exploring like how we got here, aside from like the Sestak AV, kind of going back. What do you think about the idea of private membership associations, private contract associations, and operating in the private with like education and whatever people want to do? And I'll use an example because I don't know if they have things like this in the UK, but here in the United States, like, and I was trying to figure out what this was called in a video, but it's called the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Warfare.
Right.
And they have their own little like club. It's a building that you have to be a member to be able to go to the facility. They can serve alcohol 24/7, don't have to adhere to the local laws. And as long as everything stays there and doesn't cause any disruption or harm to anybody on the outside, they get left alone, because the people who joined the PMA, PCA agreed to the terms of what is being said. Do you guys have anything like that? And what are your thoughts about operating in the private?
I'm all for operating in the private. And I mean, and the thing is, Chris, it's not just in the physical world, it's in the world of the internet as well. Because there's a massive difference. I mean, I know you were talking about bricks and mortar, as it were. And yeah, private members clubs, private meetings, if you've got the facilities and the finances to actually create a solid brick. I mean, look at all the...
You could replicate that on the internet, though. You could have a website that's got a forum, and you can have videos, and you can do live streams and interact with your members of your site. So you can have a private membership association, like a Patreon.
Exactly.
That's private.
Yeah. Well, the Patreon, not so much so, because there's a third party involved.
Well, but I'm saying if you can get past the third party aspect, just giving an example.
And I think this is how a lot of remedy sites have got round things in the past, and this is also a reason why a lot of remedy sites have had takedown notices. Because I know personally of one guy over in the States had a fantastic site on all different types of remedies and forensic auditing and all this kind of stuff in the early days. And his site got targeted. Then the internet service provider got approached and said, take that website off, because they were giving out information that would threaten certain areas of the system, because some of his remedies were actually working. So the way to get around that, to get those, to stop that happening, is to create a private members website or part of the website saying, well, unless you've paid a small subscription of whatever it is, that then becomes almost a trust, and the members are the beneficiaries.
But now would that, in that sense, protect the individual?
Exactly.
So the ISP wouldn't really have like any reason to go after them.
Because if you think about it, if it's behind a subscription wall, it's not in the public domain.
So behind a paywall, put it in a private.
Yeah, exactly. So your website might be in the public domain, but your forum,
to access certain information, you have to agree to join to the terms.
Exactly.
Which is a private,
So you
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So you end up with that 2-tier site. Say, well, this is public, this is fine, and then we're not doing anything nefarious here and what have you. And this is private, so it's not public. So it's not in the public domain. So you've got that firewall up there to stop people. So yeah, I'm really all for that in terms of anything that people want to do in their private capacity. You know, if they wish to, and this again, you know, it touches on the very subject that if you're on the internet, you're certainly not in the private.
No, like what we're doing is not private. We can't say it because it's available. If we're going to be putting it on our YouTube channels, which anybody can see, that puts it in the public. But if we were to put this on our website behind a paywall,
exactly,
then it would be private. Just so people get a difference of a distinguishment of that.
And it's also like even the ebooks that I sell, they're private because you have to buy them to access the information. So irrespective of what the content is, nobody can really complain and say, oh, this is you're giving misinformation, you're this, that, and the. I'm not giving anybody any information. They are purchasing something.
But they can only purchase the books through you privately. They can't go to Amazon and purchase it.
No.
Because if it was on Amazon, then it would be publicly available.
Yeah,
regardless of if somebody purchased it.
Yeah. The only thing I've got on Amazon, Chris, is a very old children's storybook that I wrote years ago.
Oh, cool.
Called The Wizard That Farted. But
you and farts, old fart.
I know, old fart, young at heart. I know.
I love it.
But yeah, I mean, you know, so this is where again, I think we're coming back to status correction in essence as well, because people talk about the public and the private. Well, there are so many levels to understand the difference between public and private. It took me a while to get my head around all of them, and I probably still got a ways to go anyway. But it's like when you're going into a court venue, you decide whether you're going to act in the public or the private. When you're sending notices, you decide whether you're going to act in the public or the private. Now, a general rule of thumb that I use when I'm sending out legal documents, the deciding factor for me is quite a simple one, public or private, when I'm making that decision is, well, if a claim is being made against me, I'm private. If I'm making a claim, it's public.
And you can choose to switch hats as you see fit.
Exactly. For the simple reason is that if I'm making the claim, I'm not going to muddy the waters of that claim by starting off with, I am a sovereign being, right? Not interested. What they're interested in, what is your cause of action? Where's your evidence? And where's your remedy? Okay. I'm not going to argue the Mr. or the all caps and all the rest of it, because that's not in question, because I'm the one bringing the claim. But if a claim is made against me, then I may wish to use as my defense at some point my living status as the agent representative for the all caps fictional corporation that you're trying to get something out of. See, now I've switched my role.
Right.
but I get to choose because I'm sovereign and I can take care of my own affairs and I fully understand and comprehend what I'm doing. And this is the difference, is being a sovereign is more important than correcting your status to say you're a sovereign. Your actions should indicate that you're a sovereign.
When we talk about the Bible too being like the ultimate form of law, they say it says in the Bible, you will know them by their fruits.
Yes.
Which to me, you will know somebody by who they are, by their actions, by what they not what they say, what they do.
Yes.
Because that's who proves who you are.
Yeah. And again, many episodes ago, and I can't remember how long now because they all tend to merge into each other after a while.
I totally understand that feeling.
Yeah. But now I'm not I mean, my viewers will know I'm not a particularly religious person, but I like to think a spiritual person, and I know what that means to me, and it could mean 101 things to everybody else. But I always try and keep to the tenet, just one simple tenet, and that is simply do no harm.
Yeah,
that's it. That's the rule I try and live by all the time. Do no harm.
The golden rule, because I was thinking about this earlier when you were talking about things too. If we just live by not the four like maxims of common law, but if we just live by the one rule of the golden rule, just treat people how you want to be treated.
Exactly.
Or the commandments that Yeshua, Jesus left, which is love your brother, your sister as you love yourself, and love God with all your heart. And if you love your brother and that's the only way that you can show love to God's source, is by loving your brother and your sister as you love yourself.
Yeah. And some people in the boondocks have taken that literally.
That was a good one. That was a good one. I like that. You're a comedian. You're a comedian as well, which is awesome.
But no, yeah, I mean, I totally agree. And for me, the do no harm, which is why, and it spills over to, I hope, in almost everything I do. I mean, nobody's perfect, but even the book that I'm writing at the moment, I'm not plugging it, but it's a great example of, I don't want to let that out in the public until I've done the very best I can, because it still falls under the category of do no harm.
Right. And if you're giving out some information, even unknowingly, that could be detrimental to other people, that would be in a way causing people harm. Yeah. So I get that, man. And that's one of the reasons why I like you.
And for me, that's the only rule I need. And if being a sovereign in head and heart, as it were. I mean, I used to teach this thing, and it's actually in the masterclass manual, which is called Head, Heart, and Hands. And I used to teach this in the corporate sector for senior managers. And what it basically means is that there are three aspects to all of us in terms of anything that we wish to do, any action that we have in life is covered by the three H's, the head, heart, and hands. And the only time in life where we have imbalance, whether that be in the form of depression, anxiety, stress, whatever it is, the only time we have imbalance is when one of those three H's is out of balance with the other two. In other words, if your head and heart is in balance, but your hands, which indicate action, if your actions are different, there's going to be internal conflict. If your actions and your heart are in balance, but you're thinking other thoughts, there's going to be internal conflict. But I can tell you now, if all three are in concert with each other, you will be unstoppable. It's that simple. I mean, I like to boil down all the stuff that's flying around the world and go, look, guys, here's the three elements. Get them in balance.
I love it, dude. I love it.
If your head agrees with your heart and your actions speak the language of your head and heart, and you're all three in agreement, you can't be stopped. You are a force of nature. And
well said.
And the thing is, we might be vulnerable at birth because obviously we've just come into this world, but we are all born as a force of nature. And that force has been systematically dismantled, covered up, and taken away by the very powers that claim to support us. that you know, and that's why for me remedy comes in so many different forms. It's not just about dealing with notices or whatever it might be. It's head, heart, and hands remedy. You know, I realized, and you and I were talking before we hit the record button, that we were talking about getting away from it and having some downtime and all the rest of it. Well, that's your head and your heart saying your actions are wearing you out. You need to do something else in order to recharge these two.
Yeah.
And for me to get those 3 H's back in balance, sometimes I need to just walk away from all of this and just spend a day saying, you know what, normally Mondays are my day off. And inevitably what I end up doing is ignoring that because I'm still answering emails on a Sunday and this, that, and the other. And that is not the permission for anyone to email me on a Sunday, because I won't reply to you.
I like how you circled that.
Yeah, I thought I better catch that one pretty quick, actually.
That was good. Okay, so what I was going to say, we're at the hour and a half mark.
Wow.
I think this would be a good place to wrap up. I was wanting to go into some solutions and remedies, but I think we can hold that. And I think that kind of mixed throughout the conversation, there's been some solutions and remedies that have been said, just not outright. You know, so just read between the lines with a lot of this as you listen to these episodes. So I definitely want to be able to do one expounding a little bit more on solutions and remedies, talking about economics, maybe going into some history. So I look forward to doing more episodes. And again, we're doing this on both of our YouTube channels, so make sure you subscribe to both channels. Before we wrap up the video, Robert, do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to add?
Well, one thing I would say on the side of remedy in general, I know we've covered a lot of stuff, but we touched briefly on the Bible. And as I said, I'm not a religious man, but I am quite spiritual. And what I'd like people to do is to understand that faith and religion are 2 different things. I have no problem with people having faith in the Bible, but don't put all your faith in the guy telling you how to interpret that book. That's, to me, is one of the biggest mistakes. What I would suggest is that for all you people who have a copy of the Bible handy, start reading it from a contract point of view. Put your headspace into contract and laws of equity without the religious connotations, and see what you reveal to yourself when you're in a different headspace. That would probably be my last suggestion for this episode.
You know, and the one thing I would add to that is just to reiterate that there is a difference between spirituality and religion. Being spiritual and being religious. Yeah. And religion, to me, is man's interpretation of the spiritual. So,
and that's the problem. It has to be an individual interpretation.
Right. Now you just taking what you're being told, because that's the problem. You know, when you're talking about deprogramming yourself, trying to unlearn what you've been taught and try to start your education with a fresher slate.
Yeah. If you have faith, brilliant. If you're spiritual, brilliant. If you love others and you follow the 10 Commandments, all brilliant. But if you're religious, you probably need to do a bit more. You need to do a bit more due diligence.
You're probably a hypocrite.
Well, yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
I mean, I'll flat out say it. That's why, I grew up as a traditional Christian, and I wouldn't want to, for a while, I just wouldn't even identify as a Christian. But what I started identifying is a practicing Christian, and I got this from a practicing Buddhist. Yeah. Because if you follow Buddha, you're not a Buddhist, because if you're a Buddhist, you've achieved enlightenment. Yeah. So you're practicing to get to that enlightenment. Yeah. And my problem with most people in churches today that are religious, who call themselves Christians, aren't very Christ-like.
There's a few I've met that I would question their moral standing and validity of some of the statements they've made. But I mean, I'm not out to bash anybody's belief systems, faith, or whatever. All I'm trying to say is take the interpretation for yourself is as a first-hand experience of whatever words you're reading, whether that's the Bible, the Torah, or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what the book is. Okay. The point being is interpret it for yourself and remove the third party interloper between you and whoever you believe is the universal Godhead. Because believe it or not, you've got a direct line and someone's just cut it and stuck themselves in the middle.
And I want to also add that I wasn't trying to necessarily, I'm not saying you were saying this, but I definitely am not trying to attack any particular groups. But I do have a problem with religion.
Yeah,
and
religion,
I try to be very,
of religion. Yes, the concept of religion, I think, has caused more deaths in history in this world than any other area of belief. You know, it's a form of faith-based nationalism. You know, and the point being is that we are all the same under the sun. There should be no national anything because it's a planet. You know, and at the end of the day, this is why, if you look at my banner carefully, Chris, you'll see the observation deck is actually above the planet. And it's looking down on it because from that point of view, there are no borders. You see the planet.
When I did the first thumbnail, I noticed the intricacy of what it was. It was almost like being on a spaceship.
Yes.
And looking out the observation deck.
Well, one of the ideas I had in the early days, and I never got around to doing it, but because of the angle of the observation deck, I mean, you can edit this out if you want, but this
no.
But I was going to I'd created a script. I don't know where it is now, but I'd created a script to give the impression that we were in a spaceship above, but we were observing the Earthlings, right? This character was an alien, and he parked out there. The world knew about it, and what the world did was they sent up a reporter to interview this alien because they'd figured out that he'd been observing for the last 100 years, you know, whatever.
Okay.
Right? And the funny, and it was tongue in cheek, but the funny part was things like when they said, I've come from the United States. And the alien would go, explain United States. He said, you see that country down there? Explain country. Well, you see that landmass? Yes, I see that landmass there. Well, that landmass is ours. No, it's not. What do you mean? The whole planet is, and it goes in. And the reporter had to explain what we take for granted as fundamental things. But the questions back from the alien were like, how stupid are we to think
that we own
this, that we have these borders, that because the alien, and he says, so what do you think of planet Earth? He said, the planet is wonderful. He said, but the parasites living on the surface, because he said, well, we're a very compassionate race. He said, no, you're not. He said, all I've observed killing. You kill other animals. You eat other animals. You kill each other for resources. And you did it and did it. And basically, the alien tore the whole system to pieces. It was a little bit like the day the Earth stood still, but from an observational point of view. And every question that the reporter asked, thinking that's a normal question. You know, it was like this alien would absolutely destroy the very essence of the question because it actually holds no value and makes no sense.
Well, if you think about it logically, that should be the conclusion that you come up to on your own as well. You know, I mean, it's a really interesting concept of what man has done and what man has artificially created to distort the natural. Which is just completely asinine. So, no, and I definitely, I'm not editing out that because it's a really awesome little analogy to use, and it makes people think, and it gives something for people to ponder. So, again, I really appreciate your time, Robert. It's
been a pleasure, Chris. Always.
If you can hold on one moment, it's going to do my little wrap up and stop recording. But again, we're doing this collaboration on both of our channels. So depending on where you're watching it, make sure you subscribe to the other channel. Links will be down below in the video description. And as always, I encourage you to be the change by practicing change.